You're listening to the Freio
Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
Welcome to the Freio Music Podcast. I am your host, Michael Morahan. In this episode, I interview Häana. Häana is the founder and creator of Paper Gold Records and Deep Sonos. But not only that, she is a violinist and a producer. She plays violin on stage and also uses her computer to digitally intertwine beats and weave melodies so delicately that it is very difficult to tell when one song ends and the next begins, if you can even notice it at all. You've got to see her on stage to really understand her true talent and the beauty of her music, but I will let her take it further. So, take it away, Häana.
My name's Häana Thiem. I go by Häana on stage, and it's basically, I'm very particular about my brand because it's, recognizable and what people see and read and hear. And I live in LA. I used to be living in New York. I was on the East Coast for about 10 years. And before New York was Boston. But I kind of am sort of a nomadic individual, so people ask me a lot. I love the question, where have you been? Instead of, where do you live? Or where were you born? Because those questions don't really say a lot about a person, I think.
Fair enough. Well, in that light then, where are some of the highlights where you've been?
Well, some of the most special places, I lived in Germany for a year, and I lived in Spain for almost a year. I lived in Granada. And then I lived on an island in the Mediterranean called Formentera, which is just south of Ibiza. And then I traveled through Greece, and I was studying Greek, and I was going to move to Crete. But instead, I moved to Boston somehow. I mean, they're kind of parallel, kind of not. And I studied German, studied Spanish. And then I've had opportunities to play in a whole bunch of different places, but I realized that for a moment, I realized that all the traveling was kind of confusing me. And what I wanted to do instead was to hone my art and my craft and my offering and then travel, which is how it's turned out.
Great.
Yeah.
So where were you honing your craft? Was that in the Mediterranean or
It kind of started there. I mean, the really interesting turn of events. Should we get into it?
Sure, yeah, let's get into it. That's what we're here for.
Well, lately I've been posting some old photos of me, from when I was 21, living in Formentera, living in Spain, and it's a really inspiring story, and I think it's important to share the backstory of, I feel like people want to know about that. I tend to shroud myself in a bit of mystery, and, I want to let more people in, so thank you for the opportunity. So I was living in Granada, Spain, and I, at that point, wasn't performing on violin really that much. I'd started playing violin when I was 3, but I was studying languages in college. And so I had bought a violin while in Spain and started playing just real casually on the streets, but it wasn't till this was the turning point for my whole career. Somebody stole my wallet. I had no money. And so I decided that I would go put on a costume, some kind of beautiful skirt and a shawl or something. I don't know. It wasn't really a costume, but something to make me feel different and embolden me. And then I went to this restaurant near where I lived in the old Arab district and performed outside for all the people dining. And then went around and asked for a tip. And people gave me, at that point it was the 1 and the 2 euro coins, so you can make a decent amount. And it wasn't really the money, but it was the validation that people really enjoyed it. And so I was making up beautiful songs and kind of performing very fiery, and they loved it. And so I was like, wow, I can do this. So I would start to make my rounds every evening, and I could make about 80 euros in 15 minutes just doing that. My card finally came. Oh yeah, really good money. And then my new debit card finally came, so I could have access to my money, but I had started a whole new career path.
Wow. It's amazing how, a lot of people would be, A, very upset if their wallet got stolen, or B, it just might ruin their day or their week or their vacation or their moment. But you were able to seize, opportunity in the difficulty because it presented something. And now tell me about that costume. I mean, I'm just interested, like, you said embolden you, like, was it like armor, like against like negative thoughts or like a hater out there that might
kind of
at the first show or something?
Well, just to give you a little more backstory, so I started classically, and classical musicians, sometimes it's really hard to get out of that classical mode, to make up your own music, to improvise, to be free, to not read music off of a sheet. But at that point, I was really feeling not very inspired by playing dead people's music, and how to put the emotion into it. And so when I was starting to improvise, I was sort of tapping into this feeling, but then I'm naturally an introvert. A lot of people don't know that about me either because I'm up on these big stages all the time. But I've diagnosed myself lately as being an extroverted introvert.
Okay. If you don't mind, go on about that.
Sure.
How does that happen?
Well, I want to just explain one more piece to the Spain story. So the costume itself just helped me pull me out of my shell, help me feel like a different person. Like, oh, if this fails, if this doesn't work out, then, nobody knew it was me.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Nice.
Because I was a different person.
Yeah. And then kind of breaks you free of your classical mindset.
Right.
Yeah. Being dressed up in a costume.
Yeah.
Fun.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I ended up meeting this dancer from Barcelona. Her name was Sofia, and she would do this kind of flamenco mime ballet movements, and her music or my music would inspire her movements and this reverse. And then we ended up traveling to Barcelona. She lived on an organic kind of compound just outside of Barcelona. And so we ended up traveling to Formentera and living on this island in the Mediterranean and performing every day. It was amazing. I mean, and so to this day, I still perform with dancers, especially with ballerinas. So it's you never know where life will take you.
That's awesome. So if you could go back to the extroverted introvert, or vice versa, I don't know. I get things.
Extroverted introvert, yes.
Yeah, go ahead. What does that mean to you?
Well, so I used to be extremely shy, to the point of, not really even knowing how to talk to people. I mean, not that extreme, but when I was a kid, I was a thinker. I loved to read. I just liked to hang out by myself. I always was an artist, drawing and photographing. My dad gave me a camera when I was, 4 or 5, which is also my parallel career as a photographer. But yeah, I mean, the act of like being, like reaching out, talking to people. My older sister, was always very extroverted. And so I feel like, in birth order, sometimes the kids want to be different than their siblings. So I was more the quiet thinker, the like pensive one. And but then what actually happened is that I started working at a restaurant. And when you have a role, you have things that you need to say to have people order food. And I would just make jokes. I started my stand-up comedian career at that moment. And, like to get people to laugh, to have fun, to interact, to get to meet them. But like, you don't have to go very deep. Like, you just have conversations. And through that, I learned how to be a bit more extroverted. And just like, and to this day, like when I meet people, I really try to get to the root of who they are, rather than, how are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Like, those questions are so boring. Like, ask interesting questions. And so sometimes like making a silly joke, or like asking something interesting, like where it feels natural, but you're like getting to the heart of the person. That's how I like to interact with people. But I still remain a very one-on-one person. I don't really like big groups, but there's something about being on a stage where I just embody this energy, and then I'm kind of like pulling everyone into my world and kind of captivating. But, like, yeah, I'm definitely an extrovert, but in an introverted role. I don't know. I'm sure there are other people like me out there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, while you're on stage, I mean, does it feel like the crowd's kind of giving you energy?
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
So you kind of take in that group, collective energy.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, now you made it difficult for me to ask good questions because you've already ruled out all the shitty questions.
You can ask me those boring questions. I don't care.
No, I do have one that's super general, and it's kind of a curveball, but like I just am curious where everybody takes it. But what is music to you?
Music is a universal language. You can talk to everyone about it, even people who are deaf. They could still feel vibrations.
Absolutely. Like the balloons at some shows, there's like a deaf area where they have balloons, and you can feel the vibrations going.
Or I think the Subpack as well. Like my friend David Starfire and Zach are working with Subpack, and I'm pretty sure they do these workshops with deaf children, and everyone wears this Subpack that you can feel the vibrations of especially the bass frequencies through that.
That's amazing. I couldn't agree more that it's a universal language. And as being yourself well-traveled, how do you associate the different cultures that you've been with, and how do they like kind of meld or culminate in your sound?
I've spent a good amount of time in Iceland, and that was just such a beautiful, inspiring time there. And so my solo project started just after my first time in Iceland. And I didn't realize, now reflecting upon it, I see the inspiration that gave me and where I started to take the music. Before that, I had a band called Kopal, and I also had an electronic project called Nixus. And then I studied at Dubspot and got into my own music production, as in producing all of the music, not just writing melodies, harmonies, and having other people do the other content, the rhythms, the bass lines. And so the very first song that I produced for my solo project, Häana, was called Brim Almar, and I have a music video for that out. And that was one of the, we could get into the music video, but it was just, the biggest project, manifestation of my artistic vision to that point. So that in itself was incredible. But Brim Almar, Brim, the word means, it's kind of a play on words, but it means the salt spray hitting the rocks. Or surf, but surf sounds funny. Salt spray sounds more romantic. And then Almar is in Spanish of the sea. And the melody itself is inspired by a Norwegian folk song. And the video kind of goes into life and death and multiple iterations. And then also this folk mythology, or what is it called? Folktale about the Norns, which are these, in Nordic mythology, these three sisters who weave the threads of past, present, and future. And so you'll see that in the video. It's kind of abstract, and, I love things to be mysterious. And, but you see the Norns weaving the threads of life, and you see me going through this iteration of me in a white dress on top of a cliff, and then I fall into the water, and then I emerge as this badass, mohawk, all in black with this black Hardanger fiddle, by the fire. So it's, kind of incorporating a lot of the elements.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of people out there who don't have a music video and who do have music. Mm-hmm. So in that light, did you dream up this vision of yourself in this music video? Or how did it come to be? Was it step by step? Were you working with a producer?
Well, I had met this dear friend, very creative individual, Armand Matin in New York. And I knew that this song really needed a music video. I knew that that's what I wanted before I released it. And so I told him about my idea. And I'm a photographer. I don't think in moving pictures, really. I think in frames, snapshots, like composition. And so I told him what my idea was, and then he really dove deep into it. So he is this incredible creative individual. He works on big commercial projects in New York, but this he took on as a personal project. So he did a lot of research. He discovered the Norns. I didn't even know they existed. And kind of wove all these different story threads. And I was like, wow, how are we ever going to be able to do this? Like, this is crazy. I mean, I don't have that much money to pull this off.
And the song's only so long.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I'm like, wow, we need like CGI. But he does like CGI and After Effects. So I was like, well, maybe it's possible.
So you didn't actually take a cliff dive?
Well, I'll get into that. I mean, if we want to. Depends on how long we want to make this interview. So then he presented it to Alice Miller, who's an incredible cinematographer in New York. And she apparently has been obsessed with the Norns since she was a little girl. So she's like, yes, I want to do this. And she took it on as a personal project as well. And the three of us were very interested in creating a piece of art. So sometimes when people really take on an idea and they really take ownership of it, a lot more beauty can come out of it, because it's not just the dollar sign. It's not the commercial product. It's the art vision, the passion. Yeah. And so then everyone we hired for the team, everyone, we had a budget, but like everyone wasn't getting like their commercial rates, but everyone was pulling like 200% of their energy. Like we had this incredible assistant photographer. We had an incredible lighting designer. Part of the shoot was done underwater, and we used blacklight cannons, and they basically spent like a whole day setting up this part of the shoot that you can see in the video that's underwater, with like a scrim underwater and these blacklight cannons and this whole thing. I mean, it was incredible. The piece that they didn't do, they didn't heat the pool. And it was May, and I was supposed to fall into the pool backwards from a diving board into the water. And I'm like, okay, calm face. Like, nothing, it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. But, there's fear involved. Like wearing this long dress, all these layers. We added more fabric to the dress because we went shopping for fabrics that would glow with blacklight cannon. And, and I was envisioning how it'd be in the water. Like I had bought a cheap throwaway violin on eBay for $30. So the violin was going to go into the water. And I was envisioning, me twirling in the water and playing violin and this whole romantic, beautiful scene. The reality is, so I fall into the water backwards, and I'm sure my face probably had some kind of grimace on it, because how can you not? And then I fall in, and I'm like trying to swim up, and my dress wrapped around my legs, and I could not swim. I couldn't move. I could not do that. I don't know why I couldn't do that. Why couldn't I do that? And so we have slow motion footage of the lighting designer diving in and diving. He rescued me, pulled me to the surface, and all this water came out of my nose, my ears. It was like I'd waterboarded. Oh, also the other piece, so I had a makeup artist, incredible Jess Toth, and she had done this whole waterproof makeup look on me. That was also very important, because if you fall into water with regular makeup, it's going to wash off, or you'll have raccoon eyes. So my makeup did not budge one bit. So thanks to her. And then she was like, you can't do that again. I was like, yeah, I could do it again. But she was like, if you don't feel good, we can stop this right now. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it. And so then we didn't, I think I did that sequence a couple more times. Maybe, I'm not sure. But one of the best shots that we did was I was holding onto the edge of the pool because I didn't really want to fall in again. And with my dress, with the violin in the water, kind of waving it back and forth, and kind of creating this like abstract texture, which you can see in the physical CD. I did like a beautiful print of that particular shot inside.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was a pretty incredible experience. It was a 3-day shoot, and the end result is something that looks like we spent about 20 grand on it. But, we just pooled our resources, and it was just something that I was feeling so passionate about, and I just knew I needed to invest whatever I could in it, because I really truly believe that if you think big and if you act big, then even if you're not quite there yet, you will get there. And also thinking of it as a legacy, like this is a forever project. So I didn't want to put out anything less than top quality, top caliber. And I also didn't want to do a Kickstarter campaign for it, because I would prefer, that it's something that I'm funding. I'm not asking people for money. I think sometimes those can be successful, but sometimes it's sort of a more begging thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of like losing control, because you don't have control over the budget. You can't really plan accordingly.
Yeah. So. But I think it's important to, really put out the best quality work that you can, because it'll be for forever. I mean, we don't know really what the future holds, but I'm thinking it'll live forever.
Forever, as long as foreseeable.
Yes.
Working with that, production team, but also musically. I mean, building your albums, recording it, collaborating with other musicians and sound engineers. How do you build and cultivate a team, that helps you succeed? If you could kind of speak to like the building of teams.
Sure. Well, Brim Almar was the first song that I did for my solo project, and I actually went through an iteration of a few different producers. My friend Ben Incanti did some of the dubstep sort of growls and textures, and then Emsh Subatomic. He worked with me. He was like, okay, before we actually mix this, I think we need to go in on the sounds themselves. Like, let's get the best kick drum sound we can. Let's get the best textures, the best, because if you have the best quality audio, then everything else will follow. And so he also had the idea to merge, when you're doing electronic music, but with violin or vocals, kind of merging those elements so it's not this cold, stark electronic content. And so when I went in the studio, I recorded peppercorns, rice shakers, like these organic shaker textures, and then also this Icelandic jaw harp that I had. And just in the act of having a few organic percussive elements helped fuse those two worlds together, the organic, the digital and analog, which I still do to this day. And then from there, I had it mixed by Ming, who's another producer in New York, who Emsh introduced me to. I mean, it's kind of like, you connect with one person, then another person, and another person. But really, I wanted to find the person that really fit and really understood what I was doing, really got me. And working with Ming, he's super, super fast, super efficient. Like, there were some moments in the song where, like, transitions, I didn't really know how that would work, or different production elements. But it still wasn't there, even after all those people. And then I finally brought it to Dave Sharma, who has been who mixed that whole EP, the first EP that I released. And I basically sat with him for a bunch of the mix sessions. And the process with that is, really finding where the song wants to live, which is interesting. Like each song actually has a place where it wants to live. And because I've approached a lot of my music as like an artistic expression, that's really important. I'm not producing something that anybody else has any quality control over. It's not for, it's not like a commercial label that has this specific thing that they want me to fit into. It's my expression. And I'm ultimately giving the yes or the no to the final product. So, I really felt like Dave really got my vision and was pulling out elements of each song. Like when we worked on Fave, which is inspired by a Finnish a cappella women's chorus, but as represented by violins. I had a particular way that I thought that the track should go, but he was like, no, let's try it this way. I think this is, and I was like, okay, well, I'm open to it. And, very happy with that direction that we took. So, and then finding a mastering engineer, that's another critical piece. And how did I find, so I've been working with Audible Oddities, and he's worked with some of the top artists, the top electronic artists like Amon Tobin. I can't think of the list right off the top of my head, but I think Eskimo as well. And, just because I'm an audiophile, so finding people who really care about audio, sound quality. And the first track that I sent him to master, it came back with, it was perfect. Like no need to revise things. For this release that I did with Desert Dwellers, they put Leia, which is one of my, I think I released that in 2015. It was Leia and then 4 remixes by a few different artists, Haj, Antenne, Kaminanda, and Twin Shape. And they used a different mastering engineer. I think we went through about 4 or 5 different revisions with that one.
So it pays to get the right person.
It does. Like, again, like investing just a little more, but because it's a legacy, you're leaving behind something that will live forever.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Now, tell me about Paper Gold Records.
Well, Paper Gold Records is actually my label, and it's kind of at the moment, I am the only artist on it, but my vision with it actually, which could tie in with what you're doing, is, my goal is to inspire, especially young girls and women, to pursue a career in music and the whole world of electronic music. I feel like there could be definitely a lot more women who could take that challenge. And so with Paper Gold, it's currently a vanity label, but my vision is to take that to the next level and have it be a platform for other artists to release their music on.
Now, how do you make a record label? Like, not all artists are willing to put in the work, but just most artists don't put in that work. So, like, tell me how that is for you and how you balance dealing with the record label and all the, political hoops that you got to jump through.
Well, it's getting easier and easier to release your own music, to be an independent artist. And sometimes it's good to have an additional avenue to release your music. First of all, it's quality control. Yeah. And also, if I own all of the pieces of my music, then getting it placed for television, for commercial, for films, if I own all of my publishing, all the mastering, the downside to it, though, is that when you're part of a bigger label, you are part of a bigger network. Yeah. So if you want to do it on your own, you build your team, but everyone starts somewhere. Everyone starts small and then grows. And if it's the right thing, the path will be easy. And if it's not quite the right thing, then the path might be a little more difficult. but it depends also how much you really want it. So, the important key element that I found was distribution. And so I work with Symphonic Distribution, and they're amazing. Like, that's how I get my music up on Spotify and iTunes, and SoundCloud is different, but all the digital distribution happens through my distributor. And it's not too difficult to start your own business in that way.
You got to be bold and take that first step.
Yes, yeah, and come up with a good name. Nice. Like, really, the biggest thing was Paper Gold Label or Paper Gold Records. Which one?
Yeah.
They're so
similar. Is that
similar.
like a week or a month, or how long was that debate?
I don't know.
It's a while.
Probably a month.
Yeah.
maybe
right.
2.
I've had those too.
I've been spending a lot of the beginning part of this year and last year working on my new EP called Salt. And I actually played one of the songs last night at my show on the Green Tree stage. And I invited up a guest guitarist on that. And Salt is the single that I released in June, I believe. And then I was touring, doing a bunch of East Coast, West Coast touring with it. It's the lyrics are in Icelandic. And I worked with my friend Ása in Reykjavik. And she helped me with the diction. And she was like, because I've been studying a little bit of Icelandic and I'm a linguist, but, I don't speak Icelandic. But part of my interest in working with different languages, and I even have some made-up language, songs in a made-up language. The thing about that is to pull people into your universe. It doesn't really matter what the words mean. But anyway, the lyrics are basically tears of the ocean, salt of the sea, find yourself at the bottom of the sea, white doves overhead, and drift away. And then there's this badass Icelandic metal section that drops in, and the guy who played on the track, Stefan, in Austin. I never ever wanted electric guitar on any of my music, but that just worked, really worked. And back to your question earlier about collaborations, I do write a lot for cello. My new EP will have a few different guitarists on it, string trio with I recorded a violist, Niels Baumann, who works with Blue Tech, and then Gilberta and Adam Malouf. They're cellists who live in New York. And a lot of piano on there. I play piano too. And, collaborating with people in the sense that if you're just one person, you have just one expression. But if you pull other people in and their talents in, wow, it's so beautiful. Like Teardrop, the cover that I did of Massive Attack, I worked with a cellist named Raymond who tours with Celine Dion. Or he did in the past. And his expression on cello is just like this gorgeous, like your heart just goes, oh, and melts, and like you feel things. That's what I want people to feel things. So that's what I keep in mind with every piece of music that I write. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your first performance. Was it for your family? Was it for school? Tell me about that, and if you had any anxiety or fear.
Wow, rolling back the time. Well, before I actually, so I started playing violin when I was 3, but then we took a bit of a break with that, and I kept envisioning me in a pink dress in front of an orchestra soloing. And then my very first recital for my Suzuki concert, my mother and I sewed a pink dress. And I thought about that later. I was like, wow, I really actually manifested that. Yeah. And yes, I was really extremely nervous. Like to the
trembling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, it was horrible. I mean,
Were you singing?
No, violin.
Okay.
I think I had a pianist accompanying me. I was so young, but actually, for my class at school, when I was just learning, I would bring my violin and my Suzuki book to school, and I would have them pick out a song and then play for them. So I was kind of bold then. When I auditioned at New England Conservatory for the master's program in Boston, that was a deathly horrifying, nerve-wracking experience. I was like, oh, I should have taken, like somebody later told me about taking beta blockers because it was so bad. Like when you're so nervous, but you're like, your hands are shaking and you're like, and then my knee started to shake. And so I like did like a graceful move so that I could, stop. Like my knee was like going to fall off or something. And I'm like, I hope they don't see this. And so I got through that interview or that audition process. And at that moment, I didn't make it in, which was disappointing. But, I feel like performing on stage is a very different thing than auditioning. Auditioning is nerve-wracking. Kind of like
judges.
Yeah, they're all just sitting there staring at you and like
cold face.
It's intimidating. Yeah, I wonder how they could make an audition process a little less intimidating.
How did you overcome your fear? And like, do you get yourself in a mental mindset? Do you use meditation in order to kind of clarify your vision before stepping out and the curtains open? Mm-hmm. How do you get yourself ready mentally?
I do try to do that. If at all possible, I try to have the green room cleared right before my set and just spend a few moments of just centering and grounding. 2 years ago, I played Lightning in a Bottle in the Thunder stage, and I tried something new there. So I arrived in the evening. My set was maybe 2 days later, and I arrived to the space. It was at night. Everything was closed. And I just did a visualization there. I closed my eyes and envisioned the whole space filled with light and setting an intention to really inspire people, and just like envisioning the whole space like just this enormous ball of energy. And that was really powerful. Like arriving to a space, setting an intention, really doing some visualizations. I mean, it doesn't happen every time, like, especially at festivals. Sometimes those changeovers are just so rapid and it's just a million things and chaos and like the rain, why does it have to rain? And, but there's also all that adrenaline. So, sometimes it's a little bit like rushed and maybe not that grand, like the blank stage and then the grand reveal and then I enter. But you kind of have to roll with whatever is given to you and make the most of it. Like one important practice that I do too, like, of course it's ideal if every performance you have the best sound, the best lighting, the best ambiance, the best audience. But if you don't have all of those elements, you just fake it. You just, and what I'm saying by that is, like, let's say I can't hear myself very well on stage for some reason, or something shifted in the audio. You roll with it. You don't make a big deal about it, unless if it's like really will affect your performance. Because the most important thing is that people, they're watching, they're listening, they're there for an experience. They showed up, they want whatever it is that you're going to give them. And to break the flow, I don't really like to do that. I like to just, proceed. Like if it's not ideal, it's okay. Like it's improvising in the moment as well.
Yeah, I remember watching a set. It was actually here at Arise, and Lynx is who it was, and her computer restarted on her mid-song. She didn't lose a beat, and she kept beatboxing over the track, and then like suddenly everything cut out, and she kept beatboxing and didn't even lose the rhythm. Oh, wow. And then later on revealed that like So I hope you guys like that last song. That was just me beatboxing while my computer restarted, but here we go. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even catch that there was a crisis on stage, and she just it was just serene, just rolled with it. And I think that's something very important that young musicians often don't. I've taught guitar and learned guitar myself, and one thing that people do frequently when you're learning is you hit the wrong chord and then you stop, you freeze, you're like, oh, that was wrong, and then you go back to the beginning and start over. It's like, no, that was the wrong chord, but the next chord should be right. So just keep going, pretend like it didn't happen, so I think keeping that flow is important. So getting into that mental mindset, tell me about your meditation music.
So I have this side project called Deep Sonos, and it's a full spectrum sound meditation experience. And part of that was I wanted a channel for this more meditative, pretty contemplative music that I write. So I actually did a workshop here on Saturday morning, and it was in the dome, the Sunrise Dome, and it was basically 2/3 full. So many people showed up at 9 a.m. for this experience, but it was basically this full spectrum sound experience where I'm all my textures and sounds and electronics, bass frequencies, and then violin and vocals, and pulling people into this really deep, effortless space for meditation. So I actually have 4 episodes of these 10-minute meditations out that people can get online.
Where?
SoundCloud.com/deepsonos, spelled DEEPSONOS. And then, so I've been doing a lot of those workshops around. I really believe that music can create a very deep kind of mental, almost like a bed. You can just fall into it, fall onto this feathered mattress, and just there's a cushion, and you just melt. No drugs involved. And so Deep Sonos started, I have a lot of background with yoga. And I've been touring with Wanderlust for about 4 years. I did all of the US and Canadian festivals. And I would take people on these hikes with just my violin in its case, and we would go to a beautiful vista. I would sit everyone down and center and ground everyone in nature. There's beautiful, it's on a mountain somewhere. There's gorgeousness everywhere. And, everyone gets really comfortable. They're dropping in, they're present, they're in nature. And then I start playing violin. And about, 30 minutes, 45 minutes of just, I would improvise, kind of emulating the sounds of the birds, the bugs, the textures, ancient melodies that were coming to me. I mean, I'm kind of channeling music, but I don't normally say that. And then I would also walk around. So as people are dropping deeper into this meditative state, they're hearing, oh, the violin is here, now it's here. It's like this out of body experience.
So you're moving around them as they sit and meditate.
Yeah, but just imagine your eyes are closed, you're in the grass, you're maybe lying down, and then you hear this beautiful violin, and then all of a sudden it's to the right of you, now it's to the left of you, now it's far away. Now, I'm not moving around that much, but it's this kind of trippy experience. Because when you're falling into this deep, sedative kind of state, you're not really totally aware of the specifics of what's happening, but you are just kind of drifting off into this mellow space. So I love doing those hikes so much. Some of them were at sunset or early morning. I didn't like those ones very much. And so I did a lot of music accompaniment for yoga, which is actually how I got into my solo electronic project, because when people are doing yoga, they're not really paying attention to if you're turning the right knob or if you played that melody correctly. It's just more about this immersive experience. But what can happen with a yoga class, as I'm interpreting and feeling the environment and the class and the teacher, I am providing something for something that's being facilitated by somebody else. So a couple of years ago, I was in Portland for a yoga event with this teacher, Jill Naus, and we added on a meditation experience at this space that was specifically dedicated to meditation called Hush. So I had a full sound system, a full PA, because the bass frequencies are what are really important for this experience. So I created a whole deep Sonos sound meditation, an hour long, and it was basically like being, having a palette, like a painter's palette, and like, a little green, I want a little red, a little, splash here. And I didn't have anyone to tiptoe around. I was just intuiting, feeling what these people who are meditating wanted and creating this immersive experience for them to drop deep into meditation. And that really resonated with me. It really felt like something that I wanted to do more of and curate more. And so from there, then I produced these 10-minute meditation sequences using, this was after a trip to Costa Rica, and I recorded textures, like jungle textures. So like seed pods and like crinkling up leaves and rubbing two sticks together, like all these things I recorded with a Tascam handheld audio recorder, and then wove those into this 10-minute meditation track. And I produced it in Logic. I wrote it all in Logic, and then what was I going to say about that?
I got a question while you think about that. In Logic, are you working with MIDI and digital instruments as well as these organic sounds that you're pulling from around the world?
Yeah, I use native instruments a lot. I use Machine for a lot of my drum sounds, and I use a lot of different plugins. So I'm doing a lot of studio recorded violin, studio recorded vocals, and then sometimes like guest cellist or guest guitarist. And then I use a lot of sine waves for bass. Sometimes I'll layer that
just
with
straight clean sine wave.
Yes.
Wow.
And sometimes I'll put a bit of or I'll synthesize sounds, and I'll add on different wave for textures, or do a little oscillation, a little wobble in there to give it a little texture. The challenge for Deep Sonos to do these produced segments at 432 hertz, I wanted to try it. I wanted to see if that indeed felt more meditative. They do say, there's lots of theories about
432.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm not an expert at it, but what I've gathered, so 440 hertz is what most music is produced at, a 440. The frequency, I don't know if we should even get into this.
Okay, if you don't want to, we don't have to.
Well, I'm not the most scientific about it.
440, and I just wasn't.
440, 432. Okay. Apparently, like Tibetan singing bowls, if you put a tuner to it, the frequency that it emits is 432, not 440. 440 is a bit of a contrived frequency. And, there are theories about controlling people and I don't know. I don't even want to get into that, but I wanted to try it because people do say that 432 is the sound of the universe, of nature, of the spheres. So, and some people claim that it's more meditative.
And what about
it is challenging.
Experience?
Well, I honestly don't feel a difference. That's my take on it. But what was interesting is the challenge to produce at 432 hertz. My ear is so trained to play my violin at 440 that to down tune it just 8, whatever it is, 8 hertz. Yeah. See?
I got you.
It's am I playing out of tune or what? Is this note right? And then all of the plugins like Native Instruments, I used a lot of kinetic metal, and I love Alicia's keys. It's a plugin for Contact for piano, and a lot of these instruments you can change the tuning. You can change it to 432. Some of them are more difficult, or you had to like dive. It was a good challenge.
All right. And so these 10-minute, you called it a sequence of meditations, are they meant to be listened in order?
No, they live on their own. The first one's called Vernal. The next one's called Ephemer. Then Autumne, and then Vintra. And they're kind of seasonally based. And, but yeah, they're intended to just, you experience it, like take 10 in the morning, at night, and you just listen to that particular segment, whichever one you choose. And you know that when the song is up, it's been 10 minutes. So I sometimes find that, like, I live in LA, I go to the beach and I'll sit there without any music, just the sound of the waves. And I put my timer on, but inevitably I'll at one moment look at my, like, oh, it must have been 10 minutes already. Oh, did I miss it? And like, oh no, it's two more minutes left. I'm like, okay. But I find that when I'm meditating to one of those episodes, I really like Ephemer. I'll actually drift off into like this kind of out of body experience, and maybe I'll be asleep for 30 minutes. And then I wake up and I'm like, oh, where did I go? And like, I feel refreshed. I feel like I just took like a 5-hour nap, but it was only 30 minutes. So, I mean, the fact that it can do that to me and I created it, I channeled it, is pretty amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, what meditation does, it gives your brain a chance to calm down. And some people, we have so much stimulus, so many things going on, so much distraction. And I think a lot of us feel like we're running around like a chicken with our heads cut off. Like giving your brain and your body a moment to just calm down and just center and ground and focus. And also to not have to worry about anything. And so I find with music, it allows you to really be effortless with the space of just calming your mind. So you're not worrying about like, oh, because, the brain likes to run around like, oh, did I plan my dinner or the plans for the week or, if you can just, calm it all down. So at one of my Deep Sonos workshops, so I do these 1-hour sound meditation workshops. And this one guy said, wow, I was actually scared to come to this workshop. I was like, how am I going to meditate for an hour? And he said the first 5 minutes of music, his mind was a complete blank slate. It was completely blank. And he was like, I have never, ever experienced that, to just have a completely calm mind. I think he has a little ADD, but, I think it's super, super healthy. You can read all of the benefits of meditation, but I know for myself, when I have a regular practice of it, I just can approach my day with a lot more clarity.
Absolutely. And my assumption is that you want to share that clarity with your listeners.
Yes.
And that's why you've created Deep Sonos.
Mm-hmm.
And is Deep Sonos, is that also intended to expand to other artists, or is that a solo project?
At the moment, it is a solo project, but I do have bigger visions for it.
Cool. Well, we're going to have to stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yes. Yeah, I actually have a lot of big visions for it. All of my music can be found. This is Häana.com, and it's spelled Haana.
And what do you call the A with the double dot?
It's an umlaut.
An umlaut.
Umlaut, yes,
Umlaut.
It's German. So yeah, this is Häana.com.
Great. And what's the easiest way to listen to Deep Sonos?
SoundCloud.com/DeepSonos.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and really appreciate all the wisdom you've shared. And I wish you safe travels throughout U.S. and to Australia.
Thank you so much.
listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.
Freio music, Freio music, Freio music, Freio music. You are listening to Freio music.